Hi everyone, my name is James Feeney. Welcome to or back to my channel. Today I am here to speak about the she, fairies, fae, and I personally, as it's getting into spring and summer, I find that I work with decks and work with kind of like the energy, I guess, or the idea of fae and fairies more during this time of year. It just feels right. I to some degree connect them with nature and the outside world, and being able to get outside more during these seasons makes me feel more connected to them. And so I tend to pick up more books on fae, the she, fairies during this time of year, and then I start pulling out my decks. And so I thought I would share my decks that I have that are centered around those themes or around the fae and fairies, just so you can get an idea of the decks that I have that are of that nature. If you're curious at all, if you're looking for recommendations, and maybe a lot of these I think are ones that everybody or a lot of people have heard of, but if you haven't, then you have some recommendations. You can hear my thoughts. They're like mini reviews of each deck in a way, so hopefully it's helpful, it's informative, it's interesting, and I will let you know what I think about each of these and why I have them potentially, because I really enjoy the Fae and working with them, working with that energy. But I wouldn't say that I have a ton. I have a few, but I tend to be a bit discerning because I only like certain depictions of the Fae, and so I will get into that as we proceed. So first, I will start with the one and only one that I think everybody will be familiar with and has heard of, or potentially even has, is the Tarot of the She, a very popular one, and it's a favorite, and I think it's a favorite for a lot of people for good reason, as I'm pulling it out. And so I've edged mine in black. Actually, I had a weird experience. I edged mine in black. I had a weird experience where mine kind of showed up damaged to a degree, like they were stuck together, but when I pulled them apart, some pieces of the laminate chipped off and left little white marks. It was chipping around the edges, so that was actually why I decided to edge it in black. And the black marker, I colored over any chips, and it really covered up the chipping on the front and back along the sides and corners. And so this is that shiffer, glossy, thick, stick together kind of cardstock. Of course it wears in, and it has worn in, so they aren't as clumpy now as they used to be. But getting past the technicalities, I really enjoy it for its artwork. It's extremely expressive. So for those who think of the she and fae as beings that are very much not quite human-like, but to some degree have that element to them that is not so dissimilar, I think this is a happy medium. The use of color, the use of expressionary artwork, of line work, it's very fluid, it's moving, it feels like it's magical. We have this glyph on the back, which is found in a lot of Fae-related mythology, in associating with sort of this portal or connecting aspect. And so clearly a lot of research is done. There's a lot of knowledge going into this. I personally love the guidebook because they offer poems associated with each of the cards. It's to some degree connected, in my opinion, to Rider-Waite-Smith, but it diverges in a substantial way to where it's not at all close to a clone. It could in some ways be considered its own system, just in that it steps apart from the Rider-Waite-Smith in a larger way. And the keywords actually to me are really interesting. They get me thinking. They're thought-provoking. I like the names in the suit change, how the names of the suits have been changed to like dreamer, dancer, things like that. And so that is a contributing factor. There's something about it. There's so many layers. I think there's so much meaning that goes into every symbol. It's so intentional. This almost feels like it was drawn from almost like through like a mind's eye experience or channeling. There's just no way. It almost feels like that somebody just thought this up. And so it's a favorite for me. I constantly am returning to it. I use it all the time. It's like never leaving my working table, and I love it for that aspect. I've considered trimming it, but I don't want to. I know when you trim the sides, which is what I would probably want to do, it kind of cuts the glyph just a tiny bit, and to me the glyph itself and it being intact is important. I know that maybe sounds superstitious, but I like that the glyph is intact and I want to keep it that way, so I will not be trimming it most likely. But that's the Tarot of the She, a definite favorite. And after this favorite, we will go into a surprising not so favorite. Now, this is one that I know is a favorite for so many people. Keep it in this green bag. The Tarot of the Hidden Realms, or Hidden Realm or Realms, I can't remember. The backs. I know so many people love this deck, and I thought I was going to love it so much, and I was so excited for it, and I tried to work with it, and I still try to work with it, and I don't hate it, but I don't really get it, and I don't quite like it. They're just so... The artwork is beautiful. That's not a question. The artwork is stunning. There's a lot of thought put into these images, and I can 100% see how this is somebody's cup of tea and how it can be such an experience of a deck. However, it is not an experience really for me, or one that's well suited to me, I think. It's not that I need a scene going on in a card. I actually really like certain types of pip decks and more abstract style decks that have no pictorial or type scene going on. So that's not what bothers me, and it doesn't bother me that it's necessarily so close up on the people, but it doesn't do it for me. And I can't put my finger on why. It just doesn't really seem to speak so much. It feels very quiet and cold in a way. I don't get many intuitive types of hits. I don't really connect the imagery so much with any of the card meanings and associations, and then to me I also have trouble going off of this imagery as a launch point for a reading. So yeah, I don't know what it is, and I don't exactly have plans to get rid of it because it is beautiful, and a stubborn part of me wants to get to a point where I have like a breakthrough or eureka moment with this deck. But as of now, it's probably my least favorite Fae deck, and it's unfortunate because I know that there's a lot to it. And the book is awesome, and the way that it goes into the individual stories of the characters and that are depicted in these cards, there's just something to it, and I guess I've missed it in a way. Next, we're going to do all tarot first. We'll do tarot and then oracle. This one actually was a big surprise for me in that I did like it, and this is the Fae Tarot by Natalie Hertz. It's a US game system deck. And this is the closest, I think, to that sort of corny fairy imagery, those like pixies dancing in the garden that look like Tinkerbell. This is the closest to that I will get, and I was really on the fence about it, but I saw multiple images and slowly it wore on me and I got roped in, and I actually really love this deck a lot more than I thought I would. I think I may have spoken about it before at some point. It's almost like these beings are in their own world and they're kind of snooty. Like I view each depiction as a portal into the world. Like I get to see what they're doing, but they could care less about me. So what it is that they are doing in each picture is a lesson or something that's supposed to have something to do with the card, but they don't have any interest in interacting with me. So it's almost like a one-way experience. I know that sounds very strange and it might not make sense, but I don't necessarily get that with most of my other tarot decks. I feel like it's almost this reciprocity where the image is giving and I'm taking, and I'm giving and the image is taking. But with this, it really just feels like I'm an observer. And so the fairies in this to me feel like they almost have this superiority complex, or like they could not care less about me as somebody looking for answers. And there's actually some really cool imagery, despite some of them being very Tinkerbell-esque, very Victorian era influenced type of fairies that are fluffy and light. There are some that really get to the heart of these like inhuman figures with the branches out of the head. He seems very shamanic, and Wise. This is actually one of my favorite cards. And so yeah, you do get some of these really cool ones. I like this mushroom for the tower, and little fairies falling. The use of color, and I love how all of the borders are a different color. It's very evocative. Something about it almost like stimulates my mind with the variety of colors. And so you'll go from some that look extremely human, some that look very fluffy and nice, and then you'll have some that are so severe and look like they could bite your head off a bit. I like these guys. They're like kind of gnomish in a way. The eyes aren't really human. The facial features are different. They have leaves for hair. The moon's pretty creepy, which I like. And then what else? There's a few in here that I'm like blown away by. It's so weird because some are just so corny and some are so breathtaking. It's difficult. Like, to me, this is a lot more, this is like a really nice depiction of somewhere between that sort of Victorian fluffy fairy and something that's a bit darker. I know this is like not focusing, which is unfortunate, but some are just so interesting. Yeah, so I was pleasantly surprised by the Fairy Tarot, and this is one that I would recommend. So if you're on the fence and you're not sure, there's something to it. There is, I will say, and it's very unique. It's the only deck that kind of gives me the experience that I get from it, and I value it for that. Next, we have, I apologize, this one's out of print. If you don't have it, it'll be a little bit difficult to obtain. I know that, well, maybe first I should tell you what it is. It's the Hezakos Tarot, and I got mine on eBay secondhand. I know that you can actually get it from the creator if you message her. It is quite expensive. She's not selling them for what they were going for when it was in print, but she has copies and they're not cheap, but you can get it. So if it's something that's really calling to you and you save up, you can still get it. And sometimes you'll find ones on eBay and various Facebook groups and things. So don't completely lose hope if it's one that you're really interested in, because I knew I was interested in it and it took a while before I found it on eBay. So that was my experience. These are the backs. They're really pretty. This is almost like a world that the artist has created, that she created when she was young with her siblings, I believe. And all of the courts are like these close-up faces, and they're really expressive and interesting and funny in a way. This deck makes me laugh. It seems like it would be really childish, but it's very serious in its own way. And the figures are very gnome-like. They're not fairies in the sense of that way where we would picture them in popular media with the wings, yet they aren't that sort of energetic being, and they aren't that really nature-based non-humanoid, but they're somewhere in between. They're very gnome-like. I really like the Judgment card. And you'll get sort of weird little heads on these sticks sometimes, which is funny. These coins, I love the use of the coins in the suit. The little Hezakos coins that are almost like their own currency. See the little faces there. Something about this really creates a world for you, and it feels like you are not in the here and now. You've been transported to this fairy realm, and you're witnessing some really strange things. And I love the facial expressions on the various entities in this deck. And the courts are very interesting. There's something about them that's very upfront and straightforward, but there's this sort of nuance to them that really communicates what it is that you're looking at, and I appreciate it for that fact. And so if you feel called to this, I do recommend it if you happen along it by some chance, or if you feel so inclined to reach out to the artist, which I did, and it is quite a bit, so I found mine on eBay. Okay, the last tarot deck, Fae Tarot deck I have is the Stolen Child Tarot. This, I would say, is actually a tie for the Tarot of the She and this one for my favorites, but yeah, it's an awesome deck. I've mentioned it in a few videos. I mentioned it as a potential favorite many months ago for the previous year, and it was in my majors favorites too. So there are okay, so it's bigger than tarot sized. It's that linen finish. The type of linen finish to me reminds me of Pagan Otherworlds. However, the cardstock to me is thinner than Pagan Otherworlds, if that makes sense. So it has that very slippery linen finish that has this sort of texture that is very much like Pagan Otherworlds, where sometimes I see more waxy linen finishes, and the cardstock's thinner. It shuffles amazingly. It holds up really great. It comes in this sort of box. A PDF sort of thing was recently released for it, but it's really meant for you to interpret. There is no little white book. And to me, this feels like the Fae. The idea of a stolen child reminds me of, say, a changeling. All of the sort of Fae beings are children in this, and they're almost like these spirit beings that are part animal or part of nature. And the way the artwork is just stunning. Like, you see this salamander child for the two flames. The suits are changed too, and I really like the way that they've been changed. And you get this really, really interesting sort of like these hybrid creatures. It feels very nature-based. There's something that's so... At times it's a bit eerie. It is eerie, and I like that because it feels more true to that Fae and the spectrum. It doesn't feel like it's been sort of fluffed up and made to appear like a children's storybook. But there are times when it is quite like that, and you really get this sort of youth and vitality and nature. This is really more of that nature-based feeling, a depiction of the Fae that feels more like a nature spirit. So for those who view the Fae or the she that way, this would kind of be up your alley. But there is this inherent darker undertone with the idea of the stolen child and taking a child like and replacing it with a changeling, in my opinion. But at the same time, it's really, really sweet. And I could get lost in these images. I love them for meditation and to reflect on. And this is the kind of card that I would pull out and keep out and return to, or potentially have sort of journal prompts, just because it is so different. And it does diverge from the Rider-Waite-Smith, in my opinion, pretty significantly. In some of these depictions, I don't see things that feel very connected to RWS at all. I'm trying to look for examples of that. Some of them I can see it, but some I just really can't, and I don't mind that. Of course, I'm getting ones that seem very straightforward. I guess like this Four of Zephyrs or Four of Swords to me is very ominous, with the beings at the top looking down over these eggs. I'm not getting that sense of rest much at all, actually. It's more of this portending of darkness, of darker days to come, and it's interesting. So if nothing else, this deck is highly interesting. You can get it on Etsy, and I highly recommend it. And I love the hard magnetic boxes, so love that. Next, we will get into... Oh wait, there is one more tarot. I lied. We're almost done. 3 more. This is one that I think is debatably related to the Fae or the she in some way. And this is the Shapeshifters Tarot. These are the backs. I know that this is out of print, so I apologize. I got mine off of eBay. I know that there are some on there, and I got mine used. I know some of the used copies go for reasonable prices at times, and so if you are looking for it, I would recommend heading over to there and just keeping your eye out for one that's not so exorbitant and overpriced like I did. It took a while, but I really love this. DJ Conway and her decks, like the Celtic Dragon Tarot. I love that one too. You could argue that this is very much not connected to the she and not very Fae-like, and that it's more this sort of Celtic spirituality. I know it ties in with some Wiccan principles of switching the suits of wands and swords, and connecting wands with air and swords with fire, which is more of this like Wiccan principle or idea, as far as I know, or at least I see it in Wiccan traditions and practices. But the idea of these beings that are very much attuned to nature and sort of part of it and transforming into trees and animals, and it feels very Fae-like, or at least one depiction or view, or how some groups would see the Fae or the She. And I know the book mentions some of these beings to be gods and goddesses and connects sort of that Celtic gods and goddesses and that pantheon into it. And so that's partly why I would maybe connect it to the She, just because some view almost the Fae to be minor Celtic deities in some regards, or just below that of a deity. So it is debatable. This is one that I would say some people may not get any sort of Fae or She energy out of this deck and feel like it's very disconnected from that, and some may feel as though it's right on the money. So for me, it kind of walks that fine line, and it depends on the day actually, but I still consider it more of a Fae deck, and it's beautiful. And the book is really wonderful. I know a lot of times it's sold separately, so if you are looking for this, say on eBay, and you come across sort of the bundle, that's a score. If not, I know that there are those who sell the book separately too, and it usually is not nearly as much as the deck itself. It's not a necessity, but it is a nice read, so if you are on the fence about trying to seek out the book as well, I recommend it. Finally, we have two oracle decks. First, we will get into one that I think most people will be familiar with, and that is the Brian Froud's Fairy Oracle. I think it's the Fairy Oracle. I have the book right here. Where is it? As I can't even find the book. Okay. So yeah, the Fairy Oracle, and this one I think is like where we meet that depiction of the Fae that to me feels the most accurate. It's almost photorealistic in that this is what I would imagine a lot of the Fae or the She to look like if we could really see them or come across them, that they would take forms similar to what is seen here. And the book is amazing, and I know a lot of people love this. I love it. It's incredible. And I think it reigns pretty true to what I think the energy of the Fae and the She are, and how that kind of is objectively speaking. So it's a beautiful deck. I don't have much else to say that hasn't been said, but here are a few of the cards. I really like the more energetic sort of cards where there isn't this sort of tangible, corporeal being or entity, humanoid or not, how it's just this kind of light being or energy emission or energy imprint that makes up the composite of what that Fae is. I think that those are really, really what sets this deck apart, in my opinion. That one's always a little bit funny for me. It's so cute. And then of course some are very close to, or very humanoid-like, human-like. So yeah, that is one that I know many are familiar with, the Brian Froud Fairy Oracle. I will say that the cardstock on that one is not the best. I don't mind it, but the only thing I will say is the way that it's packaged bothers me. So it is highly likely to come in damaged, just because it's that cardboard sort of cutout that cards don't sit very well in, and so they get rattled around and they get bent at the creases and they get chipped because it's not packaged well. So the cardstock isn't bad, but the packaging is really bad, and so since the cardstock's not amazing, it sees the wear of the travel. And so I did have to return my first one because it was really damaged. Like multiple cards were bent and creased and chipped. And so I returned it, and then I got this one. And this had like a few cards that were a little dinged on the edges and slightly turned, but I let it go. I kind of realized that no matter what, I was likely going to get one that had some sort of wear or damage, and that this one was minor, was better than the first one. So do keep that in mind, and if by any stretch of a chance somebody that's involved in the production of these sorts of things sees this, like, change the packaging. It's just not good. It messes up the deck. So finally we have it's basically just called the card deck of the She, and this is by David Spangler and art by Jeremy Berg. I know that this is one that I don't think I'd heard of until I stumbled across it. It is really interesting. I actually just got a few of David Spangler's books, which I'm reading on the Fae, Conversations with the She, and one on, what is it? It could be on subtle energies. He has a lot of books that are more of that channeled type way of communication with the She, and he sees them as these beings that are kind of in almost like a separate, not reality, but a world that parallels ours and are very connected to nature and connected to humanity. And so that's very interesting. This deck is actually not supposed to depict the She so much in a direct sense, but more so be this sort of lens into their world and to inspire and to raise thoughts. I actually got the version that didn't come with the guidebook, which I'm upset about, and so I set about getting the guidebook, which is on the way. This is a more recent acquisition. It's a beautiful deck. There are 55 cards. No keywords, no titles, it's just the image, and the backs all look like this. And so I love this. It feels very meditative. It definitely feels like you're deriving your own meaning from whatever's happening in these cards. There's just such a wide variety, and the artwork is beautiful. So if you haven't heard of this and are thinking about it, I highly recommend it. I don't think it's too much on Amazon, and you can get just the card deck for like somewhere between like $15 and $20, and then you can get the whole set with a bag and everything for somewhere between like $25 and $30. So it is pretty reasonably priced. So I recommend that. That's the card deck of the She. And David Spangler also has really awesome books. I can't speak so extemporaneously about them now because I'm still reading and getting into them, but I will be sure to offer updates on that. And Guys, I forgot a fairy deck. So we have the Fairy Lights Tarot. And this is one I often overlook, so it's funny that funny and fitting that I should overlook it when going through my Fae, Fairy, She related decks. I find this one to be so beautiful. I wish, and I really should, break it out and use it some more. There's something about it that's very different. I would not call it necessarily a Rider-Waite Smith clone or clone to any system. There's something about it that's very visceral, it's very picturesque, and it feels like you're being transported into a landscape. The characters are very whimsical. I think that they encapsulate the Fae and showcase them in a very accurate way, in a very diverse way. That's really helpful, I think, because viewing them as Renaissance Victorian looking Tinkerbell pixie figures is not very helpful or conducive at all, and I don't find that to be accurate either. So here's just a quick look at that. I wanted to show it because I had forgotten when I was going through the decks to record myself speaking on this deck, and it's so beautiful. And of course it is a Fae deck that I have, so it should be in the video. So that's all. Yeah, so those are all of my Fae decks, Tarot and Oracle. I hope that was enjoyable for you guys. And if you are out there and you enjoyed this, let me know. And let me know what Fae decks and She decks that you work with. If there are some that I haven't mentioned, because I know that there's tons out there. Let me know your thoughts on the Fae and She, how you interact with them, how you view them, your relationship with them, if you have one. And like and subscribe. And until next time, bye everyone.